Joe. Now we're joined by Bill Rammell. He's the Armed Forces Minister, by the Shadow Defence Minister Liam Fox, and by David Laws for the Liberal Democrats. Welcome to all three of you. Bill Rammell, let me start with you. At a time when we know the defence budget's going to be under huge pressure, whoever wins, and that there are big questions to be decided about the future shape of our defence forces, at a time of minimal resources, why not include Trident in the review?
Well, Trident's kept under ongoing review. Look, I want to get to a position where we have a world free of nuclear weapons, and this government has taken a lead internationally, reducing our nuclear weapon capability by 75%.
Why not include it in the review?
Well, Andrew, it's kept under ongoing review. We've said as soon as there is progress...
What does that mean?
It means that as soon as there is progress in the disarmament talks between the United States and Russia, we would include Trident. But if we hadn't started...
No, I don't mean including it in the talks. Sorry, so because, as you know, our deterrent in the grand scheme of things, it wouldn't make that much of a contribution to reduction. What I'm saying is, why don't you include it in a review that we consider, A, should we have a nuclear deterrent at all? And B, if we should, what should it be? Is there an alternative to Trident? These are the questions the Lib Dems are raising. Why wouldn't you do that?
We had a fundamental review in 2006, and we concluded that the alternatives that have been put forward were either no less costly than Trident or were not effective. What we want is to have a meaningful deterrent, but that we put into the disarmament talks so that eventually we can negotiate it away. But had we not started the process of renewal, we would have been committing ourselves to unilateral nuclear disarmament in the future, regardless of circumstances. Sorry?
If you're going to negotiate it away, why don't you just get rid of it anyway?
Because I want to get something in return.
But, but the Americans will determine that. David Laws, what bit of that strategic review that the MOD carried out in 2006, what bit did you disagree with?
We thought that basically that review was politically driven by people like Tony Blair, who'd already essentially made a political judgment that they wanted to keep this Rolls-Royce system Trident. And we agree with people like Lord Guthrie, Lord Bramall, former chiefs of the Defence Staff, that actually the risk is, if we go for Trident, that we may end up squeezing the rest of the defence budget, the key conventional weapons we need. And we believe...
They're the Army, and you know, the Army's always been against Trident because it's not it's the Navy's. That's why.
These are people...
They've always hated it. I'm still at what bit... That defence review, I don't know if you've read it or not, but the MOD review made it clear that there was no real alternative to Trident if you're going to have nuclear, because it said that if you put cruise missiles into other submarines, they're so easy to detect, it's not worth having.
We've had lots of government reviews, haven't we? And sometimes they're shaped by leadership from the top.
What's wrong about that argument?
What's wrong is, and what Lord Guthrie, who after all is Chief of the Defence Staff, not speaking for simply one part of the Armed Forces, has said, and the previous Conservative Defence spokesman, Michael Ancram, is that you could extend the life of the Trident missiles, you could potentially have cruise-launched missiles, you could potentially even put Trident missiles on existing Astute boats. These are the serious decisions that must be in the next strategic defence review.
Why, Liam Fox, if you were an incoming government, I know that's looking a bit less likely than it did when we last met, but if that was the case, why wouldn't you want to consider that?
Because they were considered when we looked at the review in 2006. We had this debate in the House of Commons. What are the alternatives? Having a nuclear warhead on cruise missiles. Now, that will probably require us to have a new development for a missile. When Tomahawk was, the current cruise missile was developed, it was $11.2 billion just for that. Now, the Liberals are telling us they will save us $100 billion by not having Trident. They won't say what the estimated costs of the alternatives would be. I mean, they must have an idea.
Why, Liam, if...
They must have an idea what the cost would be.
Why, Liam, if this view that we're holding is so extreme and insane, in your view, why have we got Lord Guthrie, a former Chief of Defence Staff, saying it? Why have we got Michael Ancram, who used to speak for the Conservative Party?
Why don't you give us an answer to the question? If you think there are alternatives and Trident is too expensive, which alternatives are cheaper?
Any of the alternatives that I have described would be cheaper in our view than Trident. Would be cheaper in our view than Trident.
Let me bring in the Armed Forces Minister.
Categorically not. This was looked at in 2006, and they would actually cost more. The second thing is...
Why would they cost more?
Put it in a serious review.
Because the cost of producing them would cost more.
Producing the cruise missiles with nuclear warheads.
And their upkeep. But Andrew, we've heard a lot from the Lib Dems about being straight with people. The procurement costs for Trident are £15 to £20 billion. The annual annual running cost is 1.5 billion. I don't know from those figures how you get to a figure of £100 billion. It's fantasy
How
politics.
do you get 100 billion?
You get to between 80 and 100 billion over
it's
time
80 to 100.
from the
20
from
billion
the
difference.
cost of the submarines, from the missiles, from the ongoing maintenance. Trident is a hugely expensive system. It is
it's
the
5% of the defence
It's
budget.
between 5 and 8%, according to experts in the
6.
Ministry of Defence. Those are the figures that the armed forces have given.
There's
And
another-
these proposals would not be being put and discussed if it were not for the
Ian
fact
Fox?
that senior people in the armed forces
How
thought
much
this was the
money
right thing to do.
would not going ahead with Trident save in the next
Well,
Parliament?
it depends on what the chosen alternative is, doesn't it? And it
No,
depends
I
on how
didn't say the
quickly you
alternative.
start.
In terms of not going ahead with Trident, how much would that save in the next Parliament?
The savings in the next Parliament are modest. It is the long-term
They're not half
savings.
modest. They're almost
It is the long-term savings. Yeah,
Because
but
the Treasury said nothing will be saved in
look,
the first 2 years.
this deficit that we've got at the moment, which is the context of this, in the public sector and the military budget, is not something that's just going to last for 3 or 4 years.
David,
it's going to be there for the next 10 or
David,
20.
you've got to be straight with people. You can't pluck figures out of the air and say
So
that
you're
it provides
suggesting
you
that
with a
Lord
windfall.
Guthrie doesn't know what he's talking about? Is that what you're
Lord
suggesting?
Guthrie has most certainly not signed up to the £100 billion figure that you're quoting.
Lord Guthrie has suggested
Don't
that
just
the
say Lord
government's
Guthrie. You have to give us
strategy
some
is
numbers,
wrong.
some arguments about costs. We're asking about real costs
The
on real
arguments,
programmes. You can't simply say names of
Liam,
people.
the arguments that we're giving, Liam, not from here today, gone tomorrow politicians, but from senior people in the armed forces
Who are already
whose views
tips.
should be taken seriously, are that
right.
there are viable
Let me just,
alternatives.
I want to just get a
This is a
clarification.
Mickey Mouse policy.
All right.
You're saying something very
Okay.
rude to
Can I be
people in the
Donald
armed
Duck for a
forces who
minute
know
then?
something about this.
I'd just like to ask Bill Ramble. The Prime Minister told the United Nations he was willing to cut the number of our nuclear subs from 4 to 3. But Quentin Davis, Quentin Letts probably says the same thing.
Not even close.
Quentin Davis, well, they've both got the same accent. Quentin Davis has been telling shipyard workers that the requirement would still be for 4. Which is it?
Judge us by our record. We've reduced the nuclear capability by 75%. We are exploring whether we can maintain continuous at-sea deterrence with 3 submarines
So it could be
rather
3,
than 4.
but would it be
Yes.
3 or 4?
If we can maintain the continuous deterrence with 3,
So why
we
is
will
Quentin-
do that.
so why is Quentin
we are,
telling us
Why is he
it's 4?
promising 4 to shipyard workers?
Look, the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State speak on these matters. We've made clear
So
if we can get
He's
to
the
3,
procurement
we
minister.
want to.
He's in
so
charge
we'll
of
ignore
defence
the
orders.
procurement minister and Quentin Letts.
Judge us on our record, a
All right.
75% reduction.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks to everybody, to all of our guests today. And don't go away for too long today. I'll be back at 2:15 with Listen for This, the Chancellor's Debate, starring Alistair Darling, George Osborne.